Thomas Stonewall Jackson once said that the hardships of forced marches are often more painful than the dangers of the battle. The event that triggered the Civil War came at Fort Sumter in Charleston Bay on April 12, 1861. Because the United States claimed Sumter as their own, the Confederate Army opened fire on the Federal garrison and forced it to lower the American flag and surrender. Lincoln called out the militia to suppress this insurrection. Former slave states seceded and joined the Confederacy. By the end of 1861, nearly 1,000,000 armed men confronted each other along a line stretching 1,200 miles from Virginia to Missouri. The First Battle of Bull Run, also known as the First Manassas, was fought on July 21, 1861, in Prince William County, Virginia, near the city of Manassas, not far from the city of Washington, D.C. It was the first major battle of the American Civil War. The Union forces were slow in positioning themselves, allowing Confederate reinforcements time to arrive by rail. Each side had about 18,000 poorly trained and poorly led troops in their first battle. It was a Confederate victory, followed by a disorganized retreat of the Union forces. Just months after the start of the war at Fort Sumter, the Northern public clamored for a march against the Confederate capital of Richmond, Virginia, which they expected to bring an early end to the rebellion. Irvin McDowell led this unseasoned Union army across Bull Run against the equally inexperienced Confederate. McDowell's ambitious plan for a surprise attack on the Confederates was poorly executed by his officers and men. Nevertheless, the Confederates, who had been planning to attack the Union, left, and found themselves at an initial disadvantage. Confederate reinforcements under Joseph E. Johnston arrived from Shenandoah Valley by railroad, and the course of the battle quickly changed. A brigade of Virginians under Thomas Jackson stood their ground, and Jackson received his famous nickname, Stonewall Jackson. The Confederates launched a strong counterattack, and as the Union troops began withdrawing under fire, many panicked, and the retreat turned out into a rout. McDowell's men frantically ran without order in the direction of Washington, D.C. Both armies were sobered by the fierce fighting and many casualties, and realized that war was going to be much longer and bloodier than either had anticipated. Bull Run was the largest and bloodiest battle in the United States history up to that point. Union casualties were 460 killed, 1,124 wounded, and 1,312 missing or captured. Confederate casualties were 387 killed, 1,582 wounded, and 13 missing. Union forces and civilians alike feared that Confederate forces would advance on Washington, D.C. with very little standing in their way. On July 21st, Thaddeus Lowe ascended into the balloon Enterprise to observe the Confederates moving in and about Manassas Junction and Fairfax. He saw no evidence of massing Confederate forces, but was forced to land in Confederate territory. It was overnight before he was rescued and could report to headquarters. He reported that his observations restored confidence in the Union commanders. The Northern public was shocked at the unexpected defeat of their army when an easy victory had been widely anticipated. Both sides quickly came to realize the war would be longer and more brutal than they had imagined. On July 22nd, President Lincoln signed a bill that provided for the enlistment of another 500,000 men for up to 3 years of service. On July 25th, 11,000 Pennsylvanians, who had earlier been rejected by the U.S. Secretary of War for federal service in either Patterson's or McDowell's command, arrived in Washington, D.C. and were finally accepted. The reaction in the Confederate was more muted. There was little public celebration as the Southerners realized that despite their victory, the greater battles that would inevitably come would mean greater losses for their side as well. Brigade was considered the Confederate hero of the war and was promoted that day as President Davis to full general in the Confederate Army. Stonewall Jackson, arguably the most important tactical contributor to the victory, received no special recognition, but would later achieve glory for his 1862 Valley Campaign. Irvin McDowell bore the brunt of the blame for the Union defeat and was soon replaced by Major General George McClellan, who was named General-in-Chief of all the Union armies. McDowell was also present to bear significant blame for the defeat of General John Pope's Army of Virginia by General Robert E. Lee's army. The name of the battle has caused much controversy since 1861. The Union Army frequently named battles after significant rivers and creeks that played a role in the fighting. The Confederates generally used the names of nearby towns or farms. The U.S. National Park Service uses the Confederate name for its National Battlefield Park, but the Union name, Bull Run, has widespread currency in popular literature. This next video is a short little video that I think sums up the Battle of Bull Run and the Civil War very well.
sun shone bright and clear that day, we all left Washington to lick the rebel boys in gray at the Battle of Bull Run. They came from Pennsylvania, and some from Maryland, to see the rebel boys get spanked by Honest Abe's broad hand. We said we'll run 'em to Atlanta and to Galveston Bay, but they ran us back to Washington, Philadelphia, and Philadelphia. The ladies wore their brightest shawls, the gentlemen were gay. They came to see their Yankee boys with old Virginia. I held my mama's hand and skipped when a soldier said to me, would you rather have Jeff Davis hat or the sword of Bobby Lee? We said we'll run 'em to Atlanta and to Galveston Bay, but they ran us back to Washington and Philadelphia, and Philadelphia. And then the general doffed his hat and said, let's rest a spell. And for the first time we all heard that awful rebel yell. Waters of Manassas Creek became a ruby red, and many a rib and Yankee boy lay in the willows dead. We said we'll run 'em to Atlanta and to Galveston Bay, but they run us back to Washington and Philadelphia, and Philadelphia. A fight locked in the chest of time, too horrible to tell. Virginia's cool green countryside became a lake of hell. Don't count your chicks before they're hatched, or you work until it's done. Remember, yes, remember long, the Battle of Bull Run. We said we'll run 'em to Atlanta and to Galveston Bay, but they ran us back to Washington and Philadelphia,